Hello and welcome to the Berean Book Club podcast with your hosts Francois Poe and Conrad Rieder, the podcast where we discuss books written by saints both dead and alive to see what they can teach us and the church today and hopefully spur us on in our love for Christ. We're so glad you're joining us.
It's 2024. Welcome back to another season of the Berean Book Club podcast. So much has changed. It's been such a long break since we have been on here, but we're excited for the year ahead. We have 12 fresh books. We live in 2 brand new cities. We have a new place that we're shooting and recording. There's a lot of new things happening.
There's a lot that has happened since we last spoke to you guys and spoke to one another.
Yeah.
And so maybe we can just fill you in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So Con, let's start with you. What's happening your side?
We have a second baby on the way, due in June coming up. Then we've recently moved out of Somerset West to Belleville in the northern suburbs in Cape Town.
Yeah, boy.
I have taken on a post on that side as an assistant minister at Emmanuel Church in Belleville. I started at the beginning of the year, a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, that's been very cool and very exciting. Thankfully, we're not as far away from one another as I thought it would be, because Belleville is just as far away from Tableview as what Somerset West was from Stellenbosch.
Yeah, so it's pretty similar. That's good stuff. How's the first few weeks been?
They've been good. It's been very, very good. We've had quite a slow start. I've had quite a slow start. And it's actually helped to ease us in quite we moved at the end of last year. Ames has still kept her job out in Somerset West, so she's going to be driving in. Well, she has been driving in. That's taken a bit of a toll. We're trying to figure out exactly how that's going to work. But in terms of work things, I've eased in quite fine. The year is in full swing from about a week or 2 ago. And it's been good. We've met a lot of people. We still have a lot of people to meet. Part of an awesome team there. It's been really cool.
Great stuff. I think that's like the most difficult thing from starting at a new church is just the names.
Yes.
Many new names.
Can I say though, bro, there's so many people who get that. Many people have been so kind to us. So when they introduce themselves, they say, our names are so-and-so, but you have 100 names to remember. Please, there's so much understanding from us. Don't worry.
Your heart goes so soft when someone says it. You're like,
now I'm going to remember your name.
Yes. Remember the gracious ones. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
We're not the only people who things have changed for, though. Yeah,
we've also started afresh this side. We have moved to Tableview. And I've started as minister here at St. Matthew's. And that's been great as well. I think it's always been a desire of mine to work within the church and for this to become a reality. It's exciting. It's also scary, moving away from Stellenbosch after being there for so many years. Also not being there at BTI as that's gonna continue. Not sure precisely how it's all going to look, but so it's been a lot. We are settling in. It's been good at church, just with the staff team. We're quite a few who are new as well. And so all my weird questions aren't that weird because we're all asking them. And so we've spent a lot of time together as a staff team, just talking through where we're going, what we want to do this year, getting on the same page. And so that's been lekker. And I'm really excited to be teaching a bit more. So as we get into actually teaching the Bible, which we love to do, I'm excited for that. There's a hunger for that here, and I'm excited to get stuck in. New for the kids and the family. we're getting used to the beach. I got into the water for today with my surfboard for the first time. And so that's lekker. We're loving the beach. We're there every third night, pretty much, having supper on the beach, and just, the kids are loving it, getting settled into their new school as well. So lots of change, but one thing that hasn't changed is our amazing commitment to the Berean Book Club. So sorry about not speaking to you guys. I don't know how many of you have missed us, but we are back and we are excited for this year. We have our 12 books ready, and you can go to btistellenbosch.com/the Berean Book Club, and there you'll find the 12 books of the year. And tonight we're recording here at Table View, at the toenail of the West Coast, as Conrad said. So we are going to be looking at a little book tonight. The book's name is called Hind's Feet on High Places by Hannah Hurnard.
There you go.
And I love this book. I've been trying to get us to listen to this book forever. I've been speaking to you about this book forever, and at last we've gotten through it, and excited to discuss it tonight.
I was thinking on the way here, I think the first time that we listened to this book was the very first year that we started the podcast. Over that December, January. And it was one of the things we were going to do in that first year, but we never got to it. And then you listened to it again last year, I think. And now again for the third time, is it? You said it's something that you'd listen to once a year.
Yeah. I kind of told myself that this will be one of the books that I try. Not that I listen to so many books, but it's like there's some truths in here that I don't want to forget. I want to really remember them, especially as I start the year to carry you through the year. So, I'm glad we were able to do it.
I think my excitement about this book is entirely caught on from you. I'm not generally drawn to these kinds of books, but just seeing you get so excited about this book and what it's meant and what it's communicated and how that's influenced your life. It has been the main reason I even picked it up in the first place 3 years ago. And the very thing that you were excited about, I actually used in a sermon illustration, that part of the book a few years ago, because your excitement was so contagious. So I'm stoked. I'm stoked to watch you walk through some parts of it.
I think that's the funny thing about a book like this. Like, first of all, just to give you a bit of a background to the book, it is an allegory, and so it's very much written in the same style as Pilgrim's Progress, with the names of the characters being that which they are. And so the main character is a little girl called Much Afraid. And so that just gives you a taste of what it's about. And these aren't the kind of books I'm drawn to. I wasn't someone who read a lot as a child. I never read fantasy novels, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. It was just never for me. And of course, who would suggest it? Ludwig always has like these random gems.
Oh, is that where it came
from? And so when Ludwig suggested it, I was like, let's give it a try. And the book just really spoke to me. And as you know, I was so excited. I'm telling everyone to go and read. You got to read this book. And because I'm so excited about it, there are quite a few people that then go and listen to the book, and many people who come back is like, it was good, and I'm like, no, don't you see? But I think that says something quite fascinating about just books in general. I think books are able to communicate something to us in a specific stage of life. And so we resonate with certain books more than others. I was speaking to someone today about Strange New World and why that is also a book that really, and I was like, I think I resonate with the book so much because it explained to me in a certain sense how I think, how in the West I'm a secular guy but with a Christian identity, and this is all, what is this strange new world? And in the same sense, I think this book just really spoke to me for where I'm at and the way in which God has walked a road with me. And so I'm thankful for that. So I'm excited to share a bit more about the book.
The book tells a story, so it's different to most of the books we've actually covered here, besides some of the biographies. Bit of a background just of the story itself, what's going on, what's the important characters, and then we can maybe just stop at a couple of points along the journey that are particularly stick out to you.
Yeah, so to kind of paint a picture, the main character in the story, as I've said, is called Much Afraid, and she works for the shepherd in the fields below in the valley, and he calls her up to go and live on the high places, and that is where he dwells. That is kind of called the kingdom of love, and so on. But the problem is, Much Afraid, first of all, her name, she's filled with fear for many different reasons. She's a cripple, and so she can't even think about walking up the mountain, and not just walking up the mountain, jumping around with Hinds' feet, as the shepherd does, and all who dwell on the mountain. And she also has a speech impediment, and so she can't clearly communicate. And so she looks at herself and she just can't imagine that, one, the shepherd would want her to be there, and that she will ever be fit to dwell in the high places. And so the story is really about the shepherd's relationship with Much Afraid and her journey as she makes it up to the high places. And it's a journey through many ups and downs, and I think you should listen to the book if you want to kind of like follow it. There is a chronology into it, so jumping around here is not gonna really do that justice. But I think there's some of the lessons that Much Afraid learns that I'd love for us just to ponder on a little bit as we consider the rest of the book.
So when I think about the influence this book has had on you, there's two particular instances in the book which I think people need to hear you speak about. The first one is the two characters she meets at the foot of the mountain. Explain some background in the story, what's going on that leads up to that moment, and the moment itself, and why you feel that's such an important lesson, not only for her journey, but what we draw from that as Christians.
Yeah, the book is filled with paradox. Okay, so everywhere you look, the opposite of what you kind of expect happens. Not that you can understand the story like that, but it's an important thing, I think, about the Christian life is this paradoxical nature to the Christian life, and that's something we have to get used to. It's not for nothing we so often hear about the upside down kingdom. Things are weird in God's kingdom. Often it's unseen the way in which it works. And so I think here's one of the places where it happens in this book. Of course, the shepherd calls her to dwell in the high places, and he tells her, he actually promises her with a soft and gentle voice that I'm gonna make sure you get up there, but I'm not gonna be with you the whole time. I'm not gonna walk alongside you. I'm actually going to send you 2 guides that will guide you through on your journey. But don't be dismayed. I'm never far off. If you call for me, I promise you I'll be there. But he asks her, this is now just after he's called her to the high places, will you follow them? Will you accept the guides that I've sent? They are the very best guides that I have for you. And if we think of our own Christian life right in the beginning, it's like the Lord saves us. We see the beauty of what he has called us to. And we're like, yes, Lord, whatever you ask of me, like I'm ready to go. Like whatever you send my way, let's go. And so she starts this journey, and she comes to the foot of the mountain or in the valley or wherever, and she meets her 2 guides. And as she meets her 2 guides, the 2 guides that gets introduced are twin sisters, I think. And their names are Sorrow and Suffering. And much afraid when she sees them, she's like, no, I can't do this. And then she recognizes that she can't understand what they are saying. And then the shepherd says, like, yeah, they speak a different dialect. You'll have to learn their language. That's a dialect of the high places that you have to learn. And she says, I can't do this. Couldn't you have sent? I can't precisely remember. I think it's like mercy and grace or something like that as guides. And he assures her, no, I promise you, Sorrow and Suffering, they are the best guides to get you there. And in the beginning of the story, she in the end like follows them, but she doesn't want to hold their hand or anything. But then pride comes, and there's like this altercation with pride, and then the narrator says she grabbed onto Suffering's hand or Sorrow's hand for the first time. And that was the first time she did it, but it was very painful. But she started to like accept this. And so this was the whole kind of movement forward. Right at the end, we get to just before she goes up into the high places, and then she gets a new heart, and it's this beautiful story. And at the end, she looks at them, and they've been completely transformed, and her eyes are opened to see that suffering and sorrow have now become, is it grace and peace?
Yes, I think grace and peace, or grace and joy.
Grace and joy, or grace and peace. And she can speak to them. They've become her very best friends, almost as if she cannot go through life without them. And through this whole story, it teaches us that in the Christian life, sorrow and suffering are often the ways in which God is going to guide us to trust in Him, to hold on to Him, and not anything else that we thought could carry us. And in the beginning, we're going to kick back against that as hard as we can. We're going to run away from suffering and sorrow because we think this cannot be the Christian life. This is just not in line with what God has called us to. But as we walk this road, we're gonna learn to engage. We're gonna learn to speak to sorrow and suffering. And if only we have the humility to accept them as our guides, that God will be able to teach us so that we can hear what He has to teach us as we go through sorrow and suffering. And I thought that was beautiful, that paradoxical nature. All along, it was grace and peace. But her eyes could not see that. Her eyes could only see sorrow and suffering. But as her eyes were opened, it's like, no, these are our best guides to take us to the high places. And yeah, for me, that's a reminder for me to say, Lord, when this comes our way, as it will do as Christians, may I not resist your will. May I walk through this and ask, how can I know you better through this? Yeah, so
I was just last week busy reading through something else, and the guy was commenting on a similar book, The Pilgrim's Progress, which is also a kind of allegory of the Christian life. And he was saying that when we lose these kinds of ideas of what it looks like, what the Christian life looks like, one marked with kind of struggle and wrestling with God and sorrow and suffering playing a part of that, and how we doubt and how we learn to trust God through the kind of storms of life. He was saying you really end up with a kind of like this picture of following Jesus that those things are entirely absent, where you kind of have this expectation that everything should just be going well. And he was obviously speaking specifically about the Pilgrim's Progress and just the impact that it had on the kind of the wider church during its time of writing and the popularity that it had afterwards. And he was kind of like lamenting, like we need to rediscover these kinds of things because we very quickly lose sight of what the Christian life is often characterized by, not God's farness, but his nearness in the midst of suffering. That things aren't always going to be going fantastic, and that's what it looks like, you know. The second thing which I think about, and I think about your excitement about this book, is the wildflowers. As she's on her way to the high places, it's a great story. It's a journey, and she encounters stacks of things. She encounters different characters. She encounters the shepherd along the way a whole number of times again. She encounters different kind of areas and spaces of the valley and the forests and that kind of stuff. And one of the things that she encounters are these wildflowers. Speak a bit about exactly what's going on there.
The flowers are beautiful in this book. And when she arrives in this valley, she sees all these hills with the beautiful wildflowers that are blooming in the morning sun. She's amazed by it, and she asked the shepherd, I've always wondered about these wildflowers. Why are they here and blooming, but no one enjoys them? And he uses this as a teaching moment to teach Much Afraid something that he wants her to carry with him. And that is that these wildflowers, despite no one seeing them, the shepherd walks around in these fields on his own and enjoys the wildflowers with no one else seeing them. And that in itself is enough. And the point he's really trying to make at this section of the book is that humble, quiet faithfulness to the Lord, while it is unseen by many, is just as glorious as the preacher who's proclaiming Christ to everyone and being faithful in that. He makes that comparison, that even the greatest victories that men of the faith has made over the years and all the stuff they've done, none are as great as the faith of the wildflower who blooms for my sake when no one sees it. And again, this is a difficult truth for us to grasp. It's like, no, it's not there where people see you. It's in the place at home, you know, when no one sees what's going on. How are you going to glorify the Lord? Are you going to be faithful and bloom for him and show his glory by obedience? Or what are you going to do? And it's a striking lesson for us to learn, and one that another flower just after this section also does. She walks along the desert, and then she comes to this tap in the middle of the desert, and the tap leaks a little bit. And so every now and then there's a little droplet that falls. And there where the droplet falls, there's a little flower. And she bends down to look at this flower and asks the flower, like, what's your name? And it's all dramatized, so it's beautiful. This little flower in this soft voice says, my name is acceptance with joy. And there's not much made about it in the rest of the book, but it's one of the first, it's the ABCs of the Christian life. Yes. that he says. Acceptance with joy. Lord, you give me this little droplet. That's all I need to grow and to faithfully serve you. I'll be beautiful in my own right with what you give me. And then she says, like, I hope that one day I will be a faithful servant like that and accept with joy what you send along the path, along this journey that you're walking. And she has to. In the end, the whole point is like you have to die. And again, what a lesson for us to have to learn. Lord, whatever you send my way. That's been something that I've like tried to remember. I actually want to make a T-shirt. I can already see the flower with a smile, acceptance with joy. It's like, Lord, that which you've given me today, may I accept it with joy and through it glorify you. And it's difficult. It's not. I want something else. I want the situation to change. I want whatever. But the secret of Christian contentment. Or what does he say? What is that book's name? The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. It's one of them we have to do. But the flowers are an important part. And again, it's short lessons, but these are deep truths that we have to learn as Christians.
Maybe as we start heading to the end of the episode, one more thing from the journey, from the story that kind of strikes you, that you feel worth mentioning.
She comes to this huge waterfall that she looks at, and it runs down from the high places, and she's standing next to the shepherd, and the shepherd asks her, what do you think about the waterfall? And as she looks at it, the first thing she says is that it's filled with joy, but it's also so terrifying. And the shepherd perplexingly asks her, what do you mean it's terrifying? And of course her name's Much Afraid. Wherever she looks, there's an element of fear that rules over her in a certain sense. And so she says, no, the drop from up high to for the water to jump down like that, it's just so scary. And then he tells her, yeah, I get that, but why don't you look at one of the droplets and just follow one of the droplets down? And then she does, and she looks at the droplet, and she follows the droplet down, and the shepherd asks her, what do you see? And her face fills with excitement as she speaks to the shepherd, and she speaks about how this droplet is filled with joy. She's got all this language to speak about it, as though to cast oneself down is to abandon oneself to ecstasy, joy indescribable. That's how she speaks about this droplet, and the shepherd wants to show her that the nature of that droplet is to go down and serve those that are in the valley. The whole point is that water droplet, everything in it desires to serve those below. And that for me, I don't know, for me, I go Philippians to, this is Jesus, the one who finds the joy, for the joy set before him, to serve us, becoming man, becoming a slave, even slave that dies on the cross, although he's the creator of the universe. That is our Jesus. That is his nature, is to be one who serves, and that's striking for me. And it's a challenge. If we want to follow our King, I look at that droplet and I ask myself, is that what characterizes me when I have the opportunity to, like that droplet, jump down and serve those below me? Or am I frowning and seeing this as a duty? And again, it's for me, that was just a striking image again. So in my mind, I often think, can I be like that droplet? As I imitate Christ, to drop down, and if people look at me, will they see me filled with joy as I serve, or is it the opposite that is true of me? And sadly, it's often the opposite. But yeah, it's a picture for me of how I want to follow my King.
That's good stuff, Brew. That's good stuff. If you don't want to listen to the book now, if you don't want to read the book now, then there's no other man who will better be able to convince you.
Yeah, maybe. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. It definitely wasn't mine. But yeah, maybe you'll be surprised as you listen to this. And even if you're not, if you just listen to this, I do hope and pray that these truths would be something that you'd take to heart and that you can carry with you in the Christian life.
Yeah. Perhaps as we end off, Brew, if you would end us off here, in a conversation beforehand, we were talking about this and the Pilgrim's Progress, and you were saying you think there's one big difference between these two. Maybe not the big difference, but you were saying you think there is a difference. I thought that was a really thoughtful thing to say. What is the difference?
Yeah, so let me just clarify this, that I'm no expert on the Pilgrim's Progress. Not nearly. I don't know Pilgrim's Progress nearly as well as I know Hind's feet. And so maybe I'm a bit, what's the word? Biased. But I think the reason why I'm so drawn to Hind's feet rather than Pilgrim's Progress is Pilgrim's Progress seems to me to be a book about Christian, the main character, and his journey towards the celestial city, I think is the way in which it is spoken about. And all the characters along the way teach you, the reader, of all the vices and the helps along the way. And it's very much about Christian. I think Hannah has written this book not so much to teach us about ourselves or much afraid the main character, but rather to teach us about the shepherd and the disposition of the shepherd towards those he calls. And that's again one of the reasons why this book really speaks to me. It's the places where I get tears in my eyes is when Much Afraid speaks to the shepherd. Every time she speaks to the shepherd's voice and posture towards her is always the opposite of what she's scared of is going to happen. She fails and she expects angry, but yet the shepherd is firm, but with compassion speaks to her and comforts her. So that's what I think one of the differences is. This is a book that will really teach you about the way in which God comes, or how God sees us as his children, his disposition towards us in Christ, more than it will teach you so much about your journey. It will teach you some of those things, but I think that's one of the big differences.
Yeah, I think that's a really thoughtful thing to say. And she really has written the book that way, that as along her journey, nearly every single thing she encounters along the way, whether it's another character like pride or bitterness or all these characters that she encounters along the way, or whether it's some engagement with her companion sorrow and suffering, or whether it's some sort of a kind of a valley or a forest or a field that she's in, all of those little meeting places almost crescendo in her calling on the shepherd and the shepherd appearing. And every scene almost slows down a bit.
Yeah,
and
you're spot on.
You're left with this kind of like dialogue between her and so that every single juncture of her journey is really not about her journey, but it's really about where the shepherd meets her on that journey.
Yes.
And we really get to tell more about the shepherd. I mean, it's so weird. In many ways, her response to what she's meeting is almost predictable. I mean, she's much afraid.
Yes.
She's so filled with fear. She's so scared. You kind of know how she's going to respond all the way. The shock is how the shepherd treats her and how the shepherd responds to her in the midst of her fear and anguish. And yeah, that is a beautiful part of the book.
Thanks for listening, guys. I've been speaking a lot this episode. I don't know if Conrad's going to be as excited about next month's book as I was about this one. But next month you'll hear a bit more from his side. But we do hope that you join us. Con, what's our book for February?
Our book for February is Managing God's Money, a biblical guide. This is maybe a month late because January would have been done by then. But yeah, it's a little bit more of a kind of practical book. We haven't tackled many of these over the last while. But this is something which touches most of our lives at many junctures, whether you're young or old, single or married. The list just goes on and on. This is something which is accessible and a great thing for us to be thinking through. So this is going to be our book for next month, Managing God's Money by
Randy Alcorn. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Berean Book Club podcast. We'd love for you to head over to your podcasting app and give us a review and subscribe to the podcast. It will help us so much. This podcast was brought to you by BTI Stellenbosch. BTI Stellenbosch exists to bring theology to the church. If you want to find out more information, you can head over to btistellenbosch.com. Until next time.